researching for this when I thought a cowboy hat would suffice, which I have a lot of, a bowler hat, a collared shirt, and some sort of just regular jacket are what outlaws and cowboys wore back in the day. So here we are. I think it's weird. I think I look like anyone from the 90s who loved the movie Clueless, but hey, Butch Cassidy here, and I can't judge their style. It was way forever ago. Now, Butch Cassidy, also known as the Gentleman Bandit, we'll discuss why later, outlaw and gang leader of the Wild Bunch, is very much that. He is a gangster, an outlaw. His life is so wild that he has been extensively dramatized in film, in television, and is one of the most iconic and well-known of the Wild Bunch, other than Sundance. But of course, this is about him too. So, because of his lifestyle and because of the path he went down, he is very much a part of this gangster series because he was a gang leader and he really ran the show of the West. So, we're going back. Don't worry, we'll get on with the Pablos later, okay? Everyone that you don't know but love for some reason will be addressed in this series. I actually saw a really good thread in the Al Capone series, a thread of comments where you guys gave me so many names, and I'm gonna do them all at some point, so yay. So let me have my Butch right now, and let's get ourselves ready for this ride. Let's get yourselves nice and comfortable. Grab yourself a glass of wine, sip some vodka, or crack a glass of orange juice. Light up a joint. Write out your criminology dissertations. Crush a blueberry Pop-Tarts. Sip some banana milk while eating noodles. No judgments, like, do whatever. But let's give a big shout out here before we dive into anything to Nina. Nina, if you still haven't delivered, girl, it's been a week getting deuced, but congratulations. You probably need this video more than anyone else to help you relax and help you sleep, but congrats. Let me know, boy or girl. So, Robert Leroy Parker, better known as Butch Cassidy, was born on April 13th in 1866. Way back. You've heard his name. I know I definitely had many a times before, but you might not know his story or much about him. Other than that, there are movies and TV shows about him. I mean, that's actually why I picked him. I hate, like, household names that I don't know much about. So I thought this would be a really great incorporation because there's movies on him. I want to know what he's about. Well, this will be as informative for you as it was for me when I was researching. He was born in Beaver, Utah Territory when he was 13. He was born in Beaver, Utah Territory and was the oldest of 13 children. 13. That is, it's a big family there. His family were British immigrants named Maximilian Parker and Anne Campbell Gillies. so aggressively disturbing that when I read about someone going in and stealing a piece of pie and pants, it's just so wholesome. Also, how are you guys liking this new mic? I forgot to mention that. I'm such an idiot. I've been mentioning for the past few videos I was getting something new. Listen to the quality. Listen to how there's like no background sound. Pretty nice. And let me know in the comments below if you like it. So the clothier did press charges, but he was actually acquitted by a jury. He then continued to work on the ranches until 1884, when he moved to Tellerud, Colorado, saying it was to find more work, but also because he was delivering stolen horses there. He'd then led the cowboy life for quite a bit of time there, while in Wyoming and in Montana, before returning to Tellerud in 1877. So it's a good jump of years there, just living that cowboy bowler hat life. When he returned to Tellerud, he had met Matt Warner, the owner of a racehorse. So Cassidy and Warner would actually then race the horse at various events and divide the winnings between them. Now Cassidy wasn't that well known then, so I don't know why the horse rider just didn't keep the money for himself, but like, okay. But his first taste of real robberies came in June of 1889, when him and his new friend Matt Warner, as well as two of the McCarty brothers, robbed the San Miguel Valley Bank in Tellerud, Colorado. Apparently, weeks before this robbery, people in town had seen Butch kind of training his horses to be able to handle what was to come. He would train them to be absolutely calm and still as he ran towards them head on and hopped on their back, prepping for a stealthy getaway, no doubt. But a lot of people thought he was weird, so I mean, hey, it worked out for him. Him and his friends constructed special leather bags as well to carry loot, and apparently would create and lay out painstakingly drawn out escape routes in advance, with a relay team of fresh horses nearby should anything get spooky. They were very detailed. Butch was incredibly organized when it came to his robberies, and it ended up becoming a bit of a hallmark of his. In this specific robbery, his first one ever, he had made off with more than $20,000, which is a pretty big win for him, honestly. Like, let's go, Butch, because that's about $598,000 today, so that's nice. Yeah, make fun of him for running at horses head on. He just got $500,000, and back then, whew, crazy amount of money. Also, I am in no way at all glamorizing or saying that robbing banks is fun or a good idea. It's just, you've all watched heist movies, you've all, whatever. Anyway, they made off with things scot-free and fled to Robber's Roost, a remote hideaway in southeastern Utah, sometimes referred to as the hole in the wall. So Butch, already getting some pretty good money out of the get-go, had purchased his own ranch in Dubois, Wyoming in 1890, and continued to rustle cattle and horses, as he had originally after meeting Mike Cassidy. He wasn't always just robbing banks and trains. He sometimes just stole little livestock. In 1984, Butch had actually became romantically involved with rancher and outlaw Ann Bassett. Her father, Mrs. Ann, was a rancher who did business with Butch and supplied him with fresh horses and beef. Sadly, however, within that year, the law had actually gotten up with him, and he was arrested at Lander, Wyoming, for stealing cattle, and he had actually been booked in for 2 years, which is pretty crazy for cattle stealing. There is a possibility that he was also running a protection racket among the local ranchers. This also is what he could have been arrested for, but despite his criminal ways, he was known for also being a man of his word. Cowboy years, people really only had what they said to their Tracy, Will News Carver, Laura Bullion, and George Flatnose Curry, whom collectively became known as the Wild Bunch Gang, as Cassidy assembled them to be members of his team. They assembled in 1896, just after his prison release, and they'd actually took their name from the Doolin-Dalton Gang, also known as the Wild Bunch. So creativity was lacking, much like their outfits. But also outlaws don't care. So on August 13th, Butch, Lay Logan, and Bob Meeks robbed the bank Montpelier, Idaho, escaping with $7,000. And sometime after that, it was actually a little hard to find exactly how these two met, but his PIC, the partner in crime duo, still known to this day, and the handsome, stoic, East Coast born former cowboy turned outlaw named Harry Harry, aka the Sundance Kid. Boom, boom, boom. And if you've seen from the original movies, so boring. I watched it, but quite boring. They had Robert Redford, handsome. Oh my, old Hollywood classic looks, you know. From what I could find of the meeting, apparently the Sundance Kid, was suspected in taking part in a train robbery in 1897 with 5 other men when he had became associated with the group known as the Wild Bunch Gang, where he had met kind man Butchie. Now, if you don't know much about the Sundance Kid, he is totally badass, insane, very cool dude. He's not just handsome. And, he was an outlaw in the American Old West from Pennsylvania, born in 1867, the youngest of 5 kids, so not 13, nothing aggressive. He'd ended up traveling in his young age, and by 15, by wagon, he went around stealing guns, horses, and saddles from ranches in Sundance, Wyoming. So he was a kid doing a lot of trouble in Sundance. Get where his name is from. So sure enough, he was caught, put in jail, and nicknamed the Sundance Kid while he was serving time. Now, he was known wildly for how fast he was with a gun. In the movies, they extremely exaggerated it, but if it was like the movie, man, that's good stuff. So the two of them met. Bromance for a lifetime, obviously. A few people ended up meeting at Robber's Roost in early 1897. 4 visited there. Butch himself, Sundance Kid Hottie, Bassett's Lay, and Lay's girlfriends. So as they all visited and had a good time, Butch ended up ultimately making the women leave so that they could plan out their next robbery. They'd ambushed a small group of men carrying the payroll of the Pleasant Valley Coal Company in the mining town of Castlevate Gate, Utah, in April, stealing $7,000 in gold. They had then fled back to Robber's Roost, and him and his posse honestly did well from themselves. They'd love to rob banks, they'd love to rob trains, and they'd also loved to party. They had plenty of celebrations after their heists, and his lover, Miss Anne, had actually said this of him: poor Butch, he could perform such minor jobs in his mind, like robbing banks and holding up pay trains without even fluttering an eyelash, but to serve coffee or drinks at a grand party Butch was known for being very specific and organized with his plans, and because of this, he was very successful. Butch and the Wild Bunch grew to be quite wealthy, as they'd racked up around $35,000 per robbery. Although some people say that he'd only actually robbed 4 banks, he'd also robbed express trains, coal companies, and soon would be blamed for every robbery in the Northwest, as they grew to be quite well known. They were very specific when they would perform their heists as well. They would only choose the summer months to make sure the weather was favorable, and Butch would actually avoid, yes, he would avoid killing or harming anyone as very much as he could. Although he would shoot to escape places, he'd never was known to shoot anyone during a holdup. In fact, the closest he came to ever harming anyone during a robbery was when he would use explosives to force his way into an express car. A few people would have minor injuries from him trying to break in, but even sweeter as he is again, he's such a gentleman. He would always warn and yell to the passengers ahead of time, "Get out of the way, don't hurt yourself, like it's not worth it, please be careful." And he would warn them to hide behind cargo and things before setting anything off. A couple people got injured, but he'd always check in to make sure they were okay. So after robbing train after train and powerful railroad companies, oh yeah, railroad companies used to be powerful, they soon were on his trail. Butch was, in most people's minds, one of the shrewdest and most daring outlaws in his present age, and he trailed along a gang and hoodlums of outlaws with him, posing to be a huge threat, especially since one of their hauls was around $70,000 from a train outside of New Mexico, and money like that back then is crazy. So the railway people were furious. It gave the gang a great deal of publicity that they busy. Seriously, I almost didn't get to film this today, but I would have been mad. So in 1900, what a weird year, by the way. 1900, like 1899 would have been a wild New Year's, I guess. But in 1900, the Wild Bunch was in Texas visiting some of their favorite brothels in order to blow off some steam. How sweet. And as a joke, they decided to have a formal picture of them taken. So funny. But it actually really screwed them over, which just keep that in mind for the future. By the mid-year 1900, apparently Butch was kind of getting over things. A lot of things had came up, obviously, and he was getting tired of living life on the run, which I can imagine. And a lawyer claimed that Butch had came to visit him, curious if he could get a pardon so he could settle down for good. He'd had enough money, and he was just, again, over it. But he was told that that would be impossible, and Butch actually responded by saying, "You know the law, and I guess you're right. Sorry again. But I'm sorry it can't be fixed. You'll never know what it means to be forever on the dodge." You'll never hear this terrible accent, Butch. Which is actually pretty sad. Because if you think about it, he really started this because he was a kid and he was bored. Hence the note he'd given to his mother. But he didn't want to hurt anyone. He just loved stealing, robbing trains, banks, and getting blackout drunk with his friends. He was probably looking back being like, wish my gang members kept things together so that I could just exit this life easily. But I guess when you start with a life of crime, ain't that easy to get out of. So stay in school, kids. And if kids are watching this, I'd be in shock. On February 28th of 1900, lawmen attempted to arrest Lonnie Logan, gang member, at his aunt's house. So Lonnie was later killed in a shootout that followed, and his cousin Bob Lee was arrested for rustling. Now, I don't know what that is, but when I hear the word rustling, I think of leaves. Doubt that's what it was. Well, soon after March 28th, George Curry and News Caver were pursued by a posse from St. John's, Arizona, after using currency which they'd stole from a previous train robbery. The posse engaged in a shootout where 2 deputies were killed and the 2 escaped. But Curry was later killed in a shootout with Sheriff John Tyler, and May 26, Kid Curry actually rode into Utah and killed John Tyler in retaliation of George's death and of Lonnie's arrest. Now, as I mentioned shortly ago about that photograph they took, yeah, well, a Wells Fargo agent recognized the gang in the picture as it was displayed outside the studio where it was taken. And honestly, it ended up being the perfect wanted enforcements that were pursuing them, and they kind of ran as soon as the gang members started to fall apart piece by piece. They departed from there to Buenos Aires, Argentina, aboard a ship with Sundance's lady friend at a place. She's in the movie. Which the dynamic with her and with Sundance and Butch is very odd. It seems like Butch is kind of in the relationship, but he's not, because, like, clearly she's with Sundance Kid, but, like, you didn't know that at first, and Sundance was so rapey. It was a lot. Those scenes were interesting to watch, I'll say. Anyway, Butch posed as James Ryan during his travels, and they'd settled into a 4-room log cabin on a 15,000-acre ranch that they'd purchased on the east bank of Rio Blanco. So they got out of town hardcore. They were nowhere near their men, but wouldn't you know it, 2 English-speaking bandits started holding up places nearby where they were staying, because party don't stop. And in February of 1905, the pair vanished. Odd. No, it isn't. Because they felt they needed to sell their ranch, fearing that law enforcement would find them. And they were kind of right. The Pinkerton agency actually did know of their location for a while, but the snow and hard winter of Patagonia prevented their agent, Frank DiMaio, from making an arrest. I'm guessing on these names, but again, I'm feeling this today, so I'm not slipping over too much. I'm probably just butchering them and plowing through it. A governor had actually issued an arrest for their warrants, but a friend they'd made tipped them off to run away. So the 3 ran to San Carlos de Barlioch, where they'd embarked on the steamer Condor and headed into Chile, and then returned to Argentina again at the end of the year. When they went back, they just robbed another bank and ran back to Chile. Really liked to set those boundaries. Oh, you forgot about let's just remind you. And yeah, very interesting. But they were in a very non-English speaking place, and it was hard for them. On June 30th, 1906, Etta decided she had enough of life on the run, especially because she was engaging in the robberies herself. So Sundance, being the gentleman he was not a gentleman in the movie, but anyway, took her back to San Francisco, and Butch had worked an honest job for a while under the alias of James Santiago in a tin mine. But not even a woman could tear apart this bromance. No Yoko Ono for them, as Sundance returned to his BFF for life, and they picked up from where they'd left off with the tin mine. And what did they do there? Well, they were guarding the company's payroll, so that's easy. Then the 2 had traveled to Santa Cruz in late 1907, wanting to settle down in Bolivia as respectable ranchers, because they did just want to live a normal life. I do like, though, how Sundance was like, live a normal life with my girlfriend, return home. Nah, I'll go all the way back here and live a normal life with my main man. But that definitely didn't last for long, because a courier was carrying the payroll for the Arameo, Frank, and Cia Silver miner on November 3rd of 1908 near their small town. And wouldn't you know it, he was attacked by 2 masked bandits. Butch and Sundance just can't get enough. They were kidding themselves when they said they wanted to settle down. Witnesses actually saw them 3 days later boarding in a small house owned Cemetery in San Vicente, near the grave of a German miner, and an American forensic anthropologist and his researchers attempted to find the graves in 1991. But what's great is the bodies that were exhumed did not have any matching DNA to the remaining relatives of Butch or Sundance Kid, which is pretty awesome. So in 2017, another search was launched, and they had zeroed in on a mine outside of Nevada, but the remains again were neither of the two. So the story goes, the popular story, that they did die in that shootout in Bolivia. The soldiers came in, they attacked them. Either they'd killed themselves inside or they died in battle. But there's never been any positive identification. And you guys know I hate unsolved, but this one, I love it. Either they survived, caused a ruckus, low-key enough that they didn't catch wind of anything, or they passed away in the shootout, which, Butch saving his friend in a way, I don't know. But here are some rumors for you to keep the spirit of this going. So, historical evidence suggests Butch faked his death and returned to the United States with the name William T. Phillips, where he lived another 3 decades, making a living as a mechanist. Why can't I say that word? Mechanic. Before passing away from cancer in Spokane, Washington in 1937. The man known as this Philip really fueled speculation that he was Butch Cassidy when he had written and published a book in the 1920s called Bandit Invincible, the story of Butch Cassidy, with details only Butch would have known. But this also was never solidified. People thought that he was an imposter. He definitely looked similar, but there were 2 mugshots found where it was Butch and this Phillips man both in prison at the same time. So, pretty sure he probably just took those stories from what he heard in jail. A couple of fun facts about things I was mentioning here, though, is when I was kind of talking to you about the movie dynamic between Sundance Kid, Etta, and Butch. It was weird. A lot of people thought it was true, which makes the movie more accurate. So apparently Etta was his unrequited lover that went with Sundance Kid, and I don't know exactly. But while they were in Bolivia, apparently one of Butch's uncles had died, left 30 grand to what Butch referred to as his little family of 3 while they were in Bolivia. And he used 10 grand for himself to see more of the world and enjoy traveling around while he was in the South. Who knows if an uncle died, though, or if the person that he was sending letters to back home just didn't know that he robbed the way he did, and he was just using that to say something, Another fun fact about this unsolved mystery is when the news got back to Butch's friends of his death, none of them believed it. And the sightings of him apparently came back really quickly. Some say they'd seen him in 1925 driving a shiny new Ford, and others say that they'd often hear of him visiting his family in Utah. His sister, one of many, claimed he told his family of his exploits and kept in touch with them, until ultimately dying in 1937. But this was not proven either. But regardless, according to Bill Bettinson, Butch's family knew exactly where he was buried. Bill said that his great-grandmother, Butch's little sister, told him exactly where he was buried, under what name, but that it was a family secret. And that it was a secret because Butch had spent his whole life being chased, and now was his chance to finally rest in peace and makes the